Hello friends, welcome to Dungeons & Dragonfly, where I adapt various characters for use in D&D. I'm Dragonfly9078, and today I'll be building Revali, the Rito champion from Breath of the Wild. First, a bit of background. 100 years before Breath of the Wild, Revali, the greatest warrior among the Rito people, was chosen to pilot Divine Beast Va Meadow. After falling in battle to Windblight Ganon, his spirit was trapped in the Divine Beast until Link was able to release him, earning the special power Revali's Gale for his trouble. Revali's pretty arrogant compared to the rest of the champions, believing that he's superior to them, especially to Link. Still, he does love his country and will step up to protect it with his top-notch archery skills, even if it means putting aside his personal feelings about his teammates. So, what do we want from this build? Well, since the Rito are bird people, we need to be able to fly, and Revali's a more proficient flyer than most, with the ability to create his own updrafts to rocket into the sky. Next, Revali is said to be able to fire arrows with the speed of a gale, so we'll need to be able to shoot lots of arrows very quickly. And finally, Revali is also known to get creative with his arrows, often using bomb arrows for smokescreens and distractions. Looking over at ability scores, we'll be using the standard point array. If you want to roll for stats, that's fine, just make sure that your dexterity and wisdom are high enough to multiclass. Revali's an archer who doesn't really fight up close and personal, so we're going to dump strength and put our 15 in dexterity. We'll make our Constitution 13 to better stand the cold, and Intelligence 14 since Revali's sort of a military leader among the Rito. We're good at seeing things, so Wisdom will be 12, but we're bad at talking to people, so Charisma is going to be 10. I'm not entirely sure what kind of bird the Rito are, but the Aven race from the Magic the Gathering tie-ins works for most birds. We get +2 to our Dexterity and +2 to our Wisdom, and we have the Eyes of a Hawk, giving us proficiency in Perception and letting us make ranged attacks at long range without disadvantage. Since we're a giant bird, we also have a 30-foot fly speed as long as we aren't wearing anything heavier than light armor. I'd say that Revali typically wears studded leather at most, so the only real trade-off is that our walking speed is only 25 feet. We'll take the folk hero background for proficiency with survival, but switch out animal handling for acrobatics. We also get proficiency with a set of artisan's tools, and woodcarver's tools will let us make our own arrows, as well as with land vehicles. The Rito don't really use vehicles much, though, so switch that out for alchemist supplies so we can make alchemist fire to tie to our arrows to make our own bomb arrows. Starting off as a ranger, we get 3 skills from the ranger list. Athletics will help make up for our low strength score, stealth will let us hide to snipe from cover, and we'll grab the animal handling that we passed over before so that we can pilot our divine beast. Rangers are kind of weird, because there's like 3 different versions of them, so I tend to mix and match a little bit with their abilities, though I mostly use revised ranger. We'll get the revised version of Natural Explorer, giving us advantage on initiative checks and on attacks against creatures that haven't acted yet in the first round of combat, as well as letting us ignore difficult terrain. It also lets us scout for our group while traveling, letting them ignore difficult terrain, preventing them from becoming lost, and a couple other benefits. We'll also take the revised Primal Awareness, letting us communicate simple ideas with animals using words and gestures, that sort of thing. It also lets us concentrate to tell if any of our favorite enemies are around, but that doesn't matter to us because instead of favorite enemy, we're going to use favored foe from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. A number of times per day equal to our proficiency bonus when we hit with an attack roll, we can mark the creature that we hit, letting us deal extra damage to it when we hit it on future turns, as well as when we mark it. The damage starts as a d4, but goes up to a d6 at level 6. The mark lasts for up to a minute, but it does take up our concentration as if we were concentrating on a spell. We can only deal the extra damage once per turn though, even if we can make multiple attacks, like after we get extra attack at 5th level. We'll pick up the archery fighting style to get +2 to our ranged attack rolls, and fleet of foot will let us dash with our bonus action, so we can fly 60 feet in a round and still shoot a couple of arrows. Revised rangers can also hide in plain sight. When we try to hide on our turn, we can choose to stay completely still to give anyone looking for us -10 to any checks they make to try to see us. For our ranger archetype, we'll go with the hunter. 3rd level hunters get Horde Breaker. Once per turn, when we make a weapon attack, we can make another attack against a second creature that's next to the original target using the same weapon. With our extra attack, that makes for 3 attacks in 1 round. We also have an Iron Will, giving us advantage on saves against being frightened, and at 11th level, we learn to fire off a volley of arrows. As an action, we can make a weapon attack against any number of creatures within 10 feet of a point within our weapon's range. We make a separate attack roll against each one, and we do have to have enough ammunition for each attack, but that's potentially 12 attacks with 1 action, with 13 with the additional attack from Hordebreaker. We get 3 ability score improvements from Ranger. We'll bump Dexterity to 19 with the first one, then cap it off with the Piercer feat, giving us +1 to Dexterity, letting us re-roll a piercing damage die once per turn, and letting us roll an additional damage die for crits we make that deal piercing damage. We'll also take the Spell Sniper feat for some bomb arrows. We get a free cantrip that uses an attack roll, and our spells that require attack rolls have double their normal range and ignore all but total cover. For the free cantrip, take Firebolt off the wizard list, letting us deal up to 4d10 fire damage with a ranged spell attack out to a range of 120 feet, which Spell Sniper will double to 240. We'll round off the build with some fighter levels. All fighters get Second Wind to heal 1d10 plus their fighter level as a bonus action once per rest, and Action Surge to take a second action on their turn once per rest. Action Surge is especially good for us because Volley is an action, so with an Action Surge and Horde Breaker we can potentially make 25 attacks in one round. We do get another fighting style, but we already took archery, so go with close quarter shooting to get another +1 to our ranged attack rolls, and no disadvantage for making a ranged attack while within 5 feet of an enemy. It also lets us ignore partial cover for ranged attacks against targets within 30 feet of us. At 3rd level we get our martial archetype, and battle masters get to do tricky things with their attacks. We're a student of war, giving us proficiency with one type of artisan's tools. I would go with tinker's tools to keep our bow in good condition. And we get superiority dice, a pool of 5d8s that refills on a short rest that we can use to fuel our maneuvers. Since we're at least 7th level, we get to pick 5 maneuvers. Snipe is nice and simple. It lets us make a ranged attack as a bonus action, adding our superiority die to the damage. We'll also take pushing attack for another type of bomb arrow, forcing the creature we hit to make a strength save or be pushed back 15 feet, again adding our die to the damage. But Revali does know how to work with the team. Goading Strike will use Revali's natural charm to get enemies to focus on him, forcing a wisdom save on the creature we hit, and adding our die to the damage of the attack. If the creature fails to save, they have disadvantage on attacks they make against any creatures that aren't us until the end of our next turn. If we make our attack a distracting strike, we add our die to the attack's damage and set up one of our friends to attack, giving advantage to the next attack against the same target made by a creature other than us before our next turn. That attack can come immediately with Commander's Strike, letting us give up one of our attacks when we use the attack action, and use our bonus action to have an ally use the reaction to make an attack, adding our superiority die to their damage if they hit. And finally, Battle Masters get to know their enemy. If we study a creature outside of combat for at least 1 minute, we can tell if they're better than us, equal to us, or lower than us in 2 of a handful of aspects. You'd think if he had this, Revali wouldn't look down on Link so much, but hey, maybe Link just has lower dexterity and fewer fighter levels. I don't know, I haven't done a Link build yet. We'll finish off our fighter levels with 3 more feats. Resilient bumps our constitution to 14 for an additional 1 HP per level, as well as giving us proficiency with constitution saving throws. Alert adds +5 to our initiative since we're always so eager to fight. It also prevents us from being surprised while we're conscious and stops enemies from getting advantage when attacking us just because we can't see them, useful if we're going to be laying down our own smoke screens. And finally, Warcaster gives us advantage on concentration saves, lets us cast spells while we're holding weapons, and lets us cast certain spells instead of making attacks of opportunity. The only spells we have that actually fit the criteria for this are Firebolt and Longstrider though, so I'll let you decide which is the optimal choice there. Speaking of spells, let's take a look over at Spellcasting. We're not multi-classing spellcasters, but Rangers are only half casters, so we have the spell slots of a 6th level caster and 7 Ranger spells to cast with them. Rangers get some pretty funky spells, so let's go through them. Longstrider increases the target's movement speed by 10 feet for an hour, and Fog Cloud sets down a 20-foot radius smoke screen that lasts for up to an hour depending on our concentration. Hail of Thorns is a funky ranger spell that takes a bonus action to cast and lasts up to a minute with concentration. The first time we hit with a ranged attack while the spell is up, the arrow explodes into thorns, dealing 1d10 piercing damage to the attack target and every creature within 5 feet of it who fails a dexterity save, halving the damage on a success. Zephyr Strike is another funky ranger spell that takes a bonus action to cast and lasts for a minute with concentration, and as long as the spell is up, we don't provoke opportunity attacks by moving. One time before the spell ends, we can get advantage on a weapon attack on our turn, dealing an extra 1d8 force damage on a hit. Whether we hit or miss, our walking speed increases by 30 feet until the end of that turn. Do note that it does specify walking speed, so it won't increase our flying speed, unfortunately. There are a couple of spells in 5th edition that we can use to make updrafts, but none are as accessible as Gust of Wind, which blows a 60-foot long, 10-foot wide line of wind away from us in any direction for up to a minute depending on our concentration. Creatures in the line of wind have to make a strength save, or be pushed back 15 feet. We do get to choose the direction, and straight up is a valid choice, so this makes a very fine Revali's Gale. Now, technically, the wind does move with you, so you're not actually in the wind, but if I'm your DM and you want to use this to get a speed boost to fly straight up, I'll probably allow it. Elemental Weapon makes a weapon we touch into a +1 weapon for up to an hour, and lets all of its attacks deal an extra 1d4 damage of our choice of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder, in case we need to pull out the shock arrows or ice arrows. And Conjure Barrage is our last funky ranger spell. We fire an arrow into the air and create a huge storm of arrows, dealing 3d8 piercing damage to every creature in a 60-foot cone who fails their dexterity save, having the damage on a success. Now that the build is complete, the question becomes, how good is it? Well, being able to fly is just good. The ability to rain down arrows from the sky can be tough for lots of enemies to deal with. We also have excellent AoE damage, with the ability to make 26 attacks in one round from up to 600 feet away using a longbow, as well as having multiple spells that hit areas. And despite our attitude, we're a real team player, with our maneuvers making things easier for our friends in combat, and Natural Explorer making things easier for them out of combat. On the other hand, the vast majority of our spells are concentration-based, and we also have Favored Foe competing for our concentration as well, meaning that they don't stack and we have to pick and choose or keep dropping concentration. That means that we'll burn through our spell slots quickly, and since we're only a 6th level caster, we don't have that many to spare. We also only have 5 superiority dice, and we do need ammunition for our volleys, so we can burn through regular arrows pretty quick too. Finally, we can make 26 attacks in one round, but most of them have to be against different creatures. We're very good at dealing with huge swarms of small creatures, but we're not nearly as effective against tougher single targets. Overall, Revali is definitely a formidable first ranger for the channel. Play to your strength and wipe out the cannon fodder while Daruk and Mifa take on the boss. Just don't fly too high, we're expecting some lightning next week. I hope you enjoyed the build. If you have any feedback or characters you'd like me to build, please leave them in the comments below. I'm currently building all 4 champions from Breath of the Wild, but after them I'll be back to taking requests. Thank you for watching, friends. I will see y'all later.